now that I've got everything out, now would be a good time to talk about airbags and safety systems. It'll be a nice boring conversation. So if we talk about the Mazda in particular, we've got an airbag sensor in each corner in the front. You've got a side impact sensor here on each side. You've got seat belts with pre-tensioners, and you've got driver and passenger airbag, and you've also got seat-mounted side airbags. This doesn't have knee bags, so at least you didn't have to replace those. So if we look at, we'll start with the seat-mounted side bags. These are kind of interesting, convertibles especially, because you don't have a roof rail, so you can't do a curtain like in the case of these. It's a pretty tall airbag. It comes out to protect your hip and your midsection, and then it has a four-layer bag up here to protect your head, and it comes out and you can see it's taller than the seat, and this all hides behind this piece of fabric and this little door, and it just tears the seam open and comes out. And you can't see the inflator now, so it's covered by the cushion, but when it's all tucked away, yeah, it just looks like this one. So nice seam. You got your little airbag door. They add this little plastic piece in there because that must be the way it inflates. It must be rolled up in this compartment and then it comes out. So you have to have a hard piece there so it can tear the seam open. So it starts to tear up here and then pretty much unzips it down to the bottom. That's pretty much how the side bags work. Now side bags are single stage inflators. It's pretty much all or nothing. They blow and that's it. So now if we look at the seat belts, so these have two mechanisms. So the retractor, when it senses an accident, it fires a pin that locks the retractor so that it keeps tension on you. And then at the same time, it fires a charge in the lower portion. So there's a cable in here. Might be able to see it. There's a cable in here, and when it fires, it forces the cable this way, which tightens this, so it pulls it down, which will shrink the belt to take any slack out of it when you get into the accident. That's how the seat belts work. And if we take a look at the driver bag, so in the US you always have dual stages. Rest of the world, single stage. And nothing too special about the driver bags. They just fire, and then you've got a little vent hole here on each side. So, actually it might only have one vent hole in it. No, there's two vent holes. So it fires both stages and fills, and then as your face hits it, it forces gas out of the vent hole so that it's a cushion and not just a really hard bag. And you can see where it tears. It actually has scoring on the back side of it so that it tears in a specific spot. And if we move to the passenger bag, it's also a dual stage airbag. Like I said, US you have to have dual stages. Rest of the world is normally one stage, it just fires. And sometimes you have 3-stage airbags. So it'll fire these 2 stages, and then you'll have an adaptive vent or something that'll fire on the 3rd stage. So like when the car senses an accident, it'll fire the 1st stage at time equals 0, and then the 2nd stage it'll fire depending on certain conditions, like passenger weight, if they're wearing a seatbelt or not. So it can fire the 2nd stage at like 5 milliseconds or even out to like 250 milliseconds. Now normally an airbag fills in 50 milliseconds, and then the accident is pretty much done by then. So if we look at the passenger bag, it's a lot bigger, obviously, than the driver bag. So the passenger, you can't guarantee that the passenger's in as fixed of a location as the driver. And then also it has larger vents on both sides. And if we look at some other parts of it, so you've got the module housing. It's a metal piece here, sometimes it's heavy plastic. And then this is pretty important. That's the dust cover. So when this is all rolled up, and most of these are rolled by hand, this sits over top of it. It sits over top of it like that. So when the airbag fires, this is what's contacting the underside of the airbag flaps, so that the main cushion doesn't get torn or hung up on the inside of the instrument panel. So that's kind of a sacrificial piece, and then it just kind of flings out of the way, and the cushion unrolls and fills. And this one looks like it has some extra vents in it. I'm not sure quite how they work. So they're sewn to the inside of the cushion. So they may, if you hit the airbag really hard, it may tear this strap, which would allow this vent to open so that it'll deflate a little faster, so that you don't have such a high acceleration on the occupant. Another thing we can take a look at, as I mentioned before, the windshield's broken, and that's pretty common when you have a passenger airbag deploy. You can see on the inside of the windshield there's some scuff marks here, and that's where the cushion hit the windshield as it filled. So normally on cars like this, you've got the airbag door is here, and it's pretty far forward, and the windshield angle is pretty shallow. So as the airbag starts to come out, it normally comes straight up before it starts to turn and come towards the occupant. So when you have a pretty shallow windshield, it'll punch the windshield as it starts to go towards the passenger. And this one, you can feel it cracked both sides of the windshield. It happens. Sometimes it's part of the design. Now if we look more at the IP, so the airbag doors, you can do that a number of ways. You can see on this one, you can see by the pattern that's on the edge of the flap that these are laser scored. So what they do is they make the instrument panel, and this square box on the back is welded on afterwards. So it's this piece here. So what they'll do is, so if we hold this closed, they'll come in before this is welded on, and they'll laser score all the way around it and along the center, so that you have a perforation where it can open and the airbag will come out. And then after that's done, they weld it on this square, and then these two pieces that act as the hinge. So this piece. Now, like I said, there's a couple different ways you can do it. So you can do it like this with a really heavy piece of plastic to act as a hinge there, or you can injection mold a net into it so that there's like a fabric net that'll act as the hinge instead of this heavy piece of plastic. And this one, you can see it was a good deployment. It tore along the score line all the way around it. It didn't break off to a side or anything. It opened like it's supposed to. So nothing out of the ordinary. It seems to have worked as intended. So I guess that's my boring discussion on airbags and kind of how they work for anybody that was interested.